Yes, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Woohoo, yes. Thank you for a little woohoo there. Good morning, everybody. My name is still Ike Nazwike. It's my pleasure to give you a warm welcome to the second day of the Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference. Now, I have to start today with a bit of a lousy message because today is, in fact, the second and the last day of the conference. Can I get a collective oh? But we have all of you still in the room. I don't know for how long, but anyway, we have all of you still in the room. And we have fantastic speakers. We're hearing from our conference ambassadors as well later on. So can I get a collective yeah? Yeah! Not bad, not bad. I'm not going to push my luck with you. Okay, that was good. Okay, now, if there's one thing that I've learned over the last day and a bit and the conversations I've had with you and some of the sessions I've been to, is that feminist foreign policy is not set in stone. It's something that is dynamic, it's evolving, it needs to adapt in different situations and different contexts, but we absolutely need to collaborate on a sort of robust set of principles. And that's what we're going to explore in the first panel discussion, or in the discussion we're going to have here on stage. I'm going to invite our speakers on, and we're going to discuss things in pairs and really take a deep dive into what those principles should look like. If, like yesterday, there are people who want to make their voices heard, they want to walk out, they want to protest, please know that you are heard. Okay, and that we know that there is no change, literally, without discomfort. So you are heard. Please also, like yesterday, like yesterday, there is, it was done super respectfully, and thank you, because the opportunities to have activists here on stage in direct conversation with policymakers, you know, we heard Happy yesterday from Mamakash calling out a policy as bullshit. That needs to happen, and then we need to explore that. So, like yesterday, please make space for us to have those meaningful conversations here on stage. All right? Okay, we are going to kick off, and I am going to invite the speakers to the stage, and they will be representatives from civil society and from different governments to reflect on what the future of foreign policy should look like. So please give each of them a big hand. First of all, the special envoy, rather, for feminist foreign policy and the director for human rights for the German government, Geza Bräutigam. Welcome, Geza. Yes, go ahead. The CEO and founder of the Feminist Foreign Policy Collaborative, Lyric Thompson. Eric. Great. You brought fans, Lyric. Nice. Executive Director for the African Women's Development and Communication Network, Memory Kachambwa. Memory, welcome. On the pink one, please. Great. The Director General for International Cooperation for the Dutch government, Pascal Grotenhuis. Pascal. The Director of Women Equals Men, a Dutch gender platform, Laila Ait Bali. Laila, welcome. Wow. Oh, good grief. Over there in the yellow, please. Who are those fans you got? And the Ambassador for Feminist Foreign Policy at the MFA in Mexico, Janerit Morgan. Janerit, welcome. Welcome, Janerit. Yeah, please take a seat next to Laila. Okay, before we get to work, let's have a look at what our conference ambassadors have to say on what they think is the most urgent and what needs to be done right away. Let's roll the tape, please.
It's important to trust in the power of the feminist movement. They are the one that knows what is better for them. So it's important to put budget. It's important to have flexible access, flexible finances. It is really important to listen and to raise up their voices.
It is in our power to transform challenges into opportunities. We need to localize existing global and regional frameworks. We need to empower women, those who benefit from the implementation of these frameworks.
representation is not enough. It is leadership of the constituencies that needs to be recognized and that needs to be driving the change agenda.
Funding is needed, not only at the national and international level. Funding is needed at the local level. Women's rights organizations need this funding.
In a manner which is responsive, sustainable, flexible, and recognizes and centers multiple experiences, realities, marginalizations of the communities on the ground.
I urge donors and multilateral agencies to collaborate with government in the Global South to increase domestic funding, allocate ODA funds, and enhance accountability in global health for family planning by, for, and with young people.
It's extremely critical that men and boys be aware of how gender norms impact them and others, and that they take actions to uproot the root causes of gender inequality.
I have learned from the Syrian women I worked with that justice cannot be reduced to punishment. It should deal with the root causes of injustice, inequalities, and violence, and that's what a feminist perspective should be about.
As long as an LGBTIQ+ identifying individual is not seen and ultimately does not feel free to be themselves, the fight for equality will lead on. I call for a genuine people-centered development, an intersectional feminist lens. Every person should be able to say, I'm free to be me.
Feminist institutions and feminist funds need to be recognized as critical partners driving the progressive change agenda.
Don't portray women into boxes. Listen to them, engage with them, and follow their lead to achieve a real and a sustainable peace.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what we come to expect from our conference ambassadors, plain speaking and powerful words. I'd like to get an initial reaction to the video from all of you. Maybe we can start with you, Laila. You're so far away. Laila, they know what is better for them, is how Sophia put things in that video. And that's all very well, but how should governments, do you think, really embed that idea in their policy processes? Just double check your mic.
Microphone.
Yeah.
Microphone is working,
Yep, no,
right?
that's great.
Yeah, it's exactly what was said in the video. The feminist movement, they know what is needed. And it was actually Natalia who said yesterday, and repeated it actually also in the video, that one of the non-negotiable principles is nothing about us without us. So it needs to be at the core of the feminist foreign policy in developing, reshaping, as we're doing now, in listening very carefully at the needs of the feminist movements and organizations.
But in practice, just to push you a little bit on that, what does that mean? Does that mean the creation of new departments? Does that mean inviting more women, more young women to particular meetings, affirmative action? I don't know. What does that look like in practice?
Well, for me, and perhaps also Pascale can elaborate a bit more about that, is well, you have these formal sessions about shaping a feminist foreign policy. The Ministry is now working on a handbook and is also finalizing it. And there were certain consultation spaces, which we also had some advice on how to do better. But actually actively reach out to those who are marginalized, to those who are structurally excluded in decision-making processes, decision-making spaces, and non-usual persons.
Okay, Memory, what's your take on that? How to put it into practice, embodying the policy, embedding a feminist foreign policy in the policy process?
Yeah, I think what has really been coming out is really supporting the movements and supporting the frontline activists, the women's rights organizations that are doing the actual work, and making sure that that funding comes to them in ways which are sustainable, which are flexible. So I think practically having mechanisms which are not bureaucratic, but actually allow for movements to do exactly what the ambassadors were saying they want to do, because they know what they should be doing.
Okay.
And also solidarity. I think more and more we need solidarity, speaking truth to power, making sure that they are practical, standing up for the rights and protecting the movement and safeguarding all the gains that we've had.
Okay, so more solidarity from government with women's organizations. Lyric and Pascal. Lyric, feminist leadership, in a few words, what makes a feminist leader? What makes a leader feminist?
I would say two things. One, active listening, not just listening, hearing. And I think that the Dutch have really been a model for this, even before feminist foreign policy was cool, before they were, interrogating whether or not to label it that. If we want to pick the funding piece, since that's come up a lot through the conference, this has been a real area of traditional strength for the Dutch. And the listening and adapting to critical feedback from civil society, critical friends, as Karen Burbach likes to say. You had an evolution from the early days of Flow to now the amazing Leading from the South partners that we've heard from over the course of the last 2 days. I think that's best-in-class leadership that can be emulated and learned from as other countries come to the floor. And I think the other piece is also about demonstrating grace and inclusion, and knowing that we will sometimes disagree, but the calling into a space of trust, both between the growing cohort of governments that are doing this and need to learn to trust each other, since they're coming from very different contexts, as well as between government and civil society. And I feel that trust fraying. But I think that we have seen some exercise, including by yourself yesterday, of support, understanding, inclusion, and, in the words of Tarana Burke, American activist who started the Me Too movement, radical grace.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Pascal, clearly there, listening, adapting, demonstrating a willingness to be inclusive and supportive. In a few words, just because then I want to dive in with each of the pairs. What makes a feminist leader?
What I would add is listening. And it's deep listening, right? And it's also engaging in difficult conversations and learning from that and seeing if we can push the needle. I think it's also about sharing power with NGOs, as we do in the UN, but also with youth representatives. I think we have a very privileged position, and we need to share the platform and also share the power of speech. And I think, thank you, Lyric, for saying it. I think it's also about putting money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
So it's about being authentic, and if you want something, and if you want to fund feminist movements, then you should pay for it.
Yeah.
And you should get the funding ready, and that's why we're always incredibly proud of our SDG 5 fund and Leading from the South. So yeah, I think those three things, and it's also. It's about an attitude, so it's also looking yourself in the mirror and also adapting, because we all have biases, and it's learning also from new generations or the people that we find in consultations that have very valuable opinions. Okay. So I think it's also about an attitude.
Great, thank you very much. Geza, briefly, Mike stressed the importance of working together with multilateral agencies when it comes to implementing FFP. Is that something the German government prioritizes as well?
Let me start with actually echoing what a number of my colleagues here have said. I think it is, in the first place, what we need to do is listening. Listening to all stakeholders, to all the ones who are involved, to know what is really needed, what is really, because the ones who are on the front line, they know what is actually there, what we need to accept. And I think we learned a lot from you, from the Dutch, and also from others who had a feminist foreign policy before us implemented. On international organizations and working with international agencies, absolutely. I think we need to find all our allies, all the allies we can have, to really implement what we want to achieve. And I worked as the German ambassador to the OSCE before I started my current position. And that was exactly, the OSCE is a very mixed group of states, but working with Central Asian countries, working with Mongolia, for instance, as an example, and really looking how we can implement joint projects via the OSCE as an international organization. That was really to the point, and that was a good example to do that.
Thank you. And Janarit, the next Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference will be in Mexico, of course.
Yay!
When you go back to Mexico and you debrief your team, what message will you be taking back after having spent 2 days here?
Well, first of all, Mexican government is very excited to host this next conference. Yeah. We, as you may know, we are the first country from the South that launched a feminist foreign policy. So what we are going to take back to Mexico since the first day after this one is to start preparations, because we don't have enough time. And what I'm very glad...
So you're going to go back and be like, we got to start now.
Yeah. But what I'm very glad that this is very exciting movement. Of course, we are going to engage civil society, feminist movements, because they are the core of the feminist foreign policy. With that, cannot do anything. Governments cannot do anything without them. They are the social force that moves the agenda. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that is very important for me is that it's going to be in the Latin American region, and we have a lot of energy there from the feminist movement, but also my fellow colleague representatives from governments, that they are here, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, and Chile, and the rest of the continent, and we are going to have a very interesting and very rich conference.
Wonderful. That sounds, makes you want to be there. Yeah. Thank you very much, Jenny. Okay, Lyric. Everyone has kind of touched on the importance of bringing people together, of collaboration. In terms of bringing different feminist organizations together to elevate FFP, what do you struggle with? What do you challenge? What makes you scratch your head and say, God, how do we do that?
I worry about the trust piece. I think we're moving a little quickly, honestly. I think quality over quantity is always the goal for me, and I think it's really important that we're seeing this gain traction, that the cohort of countries has diversified so much. It has moved from, in less than a decade, a niche Nordic thing that everybody in the world thought was just going to be Sweden, and now Sweden has stepped away. Let's learn from that. And you are as likely to be from Latin America as you are from Europe as the green wave goes global. We're in all 5 UN regions. That's the stuff of proving, as memory always reminds us, that feminism is universal, it is global. And I think that the duty upon us to exercise that reflexive leadership is to continue to build a coalition that is trust-based and truly global, to acknowledge, as we have been called in by our sisters in the African Feminist Collective for Feminist Informed Policies, that so much of the thought leadership and conversation on this has been centered in the North and has been white and Western, and that this project will not succeed if that pattern is sustained. Yeah. And so similarly, I think we've seen that exercise and that tension of practicing what you preach, being brave, being courageous. And we can't do that without relationship building and without networks. And it was really interesting to me yesterday on the panel on anti-democratic backsliding that I believe Dr. Haley McEwen said, the right is much better at this in terms of investing in conferences and convenings. I think on the left sometimes we're like, why are we all doing this conference? What is the carbon footprint, et cetera? And those are important questions to ask. But a tactic of the right has been to build those bridges and build that big tent and build networks through conferences and convenings. Yeah. And in the left, we tend to fragment. We tend to see ourselves as in tension or competition with each other. Yeah,
let me Geza, do you recognize some of those fragilities that Lyric is talking about? And we are in precarious times. Sweden, pioneer, no longer embracing feminist foreign policy. Is the likelihood, that could happen in Germany as well? How do you stop that from happening?
In this regard, you really need to see whether the term feminist foreign policy is the one decisive factor. Gender equality in Sweden has a very, very long tradition. It's true that the current government said they would end with this label, feminist foreign policy. But we have a great coalition, just to give you an example, starting in New York, that is called the FFP Plus group. And these are a growing number of countries from all, globally, as Lyric rightly said, coming from all regions over the world, who share a common goal. And they work on that. Some of them have an explicit feminist foreign policy, some don't, for reasons. Each country has its own background, its own approach to that. As long as we have these allies to work on our joint vision and our joint goals, I would call it goals, it's better than vision, I think that is enough. Whether you call it a feminist foreign policy or not, it's your choice, and it's individual. So there is not one size fits all for working on our topics.
It's the contents and not the containers that matter.
That's it.
Yeah, I hear you. But is there a hard truth that some people, perhaps senior government in Germany, need to accept in order to really embed feminist foreign policy, or whatever label you want to give it?
I think we have our principles, and we need to be principled, but we also need to be persistent with our principles and our principled approach, but we also have to be pragmatic. So there are areas, of course, where you need to go step by step. It's not that overnight you can achieve everything, and I think this is an experience of everyone who's working on that.
So you don't think, do you think the German government needs to be more pragmatic about this? And I'm just wondering, what are they doing which you think, I mean, we're having a candid conversation here where you think, we're dropping the ball there. We need to do better.
I think you can always improve, and I think it was you, Pascal, who said, when you look in the mirror, you can improve always also domestically, and we need to be actually credible in our own ways to do things at home, and it's not that everything is perfect, and none of our states and countries, to actually then work with partners globally.
Okay.
So,
and Lyric, for the countries in the room who are now at the start of their feminist foreign policy journey, what would you advise that they do, bearing in mind we need to make this as inclusive as possible, with voices from the south and the north? What's the best way to establish the architecture?
Absolutely. I was actually just thinking about that with the news that Mexico will host next year, because, of course, Germany hosted the first conference last year as they were actively writing their feminist foreign policy. And that's a wonderful blueprint for us to see how the outcomes and recommendations from that conference and those sessions showed up in their policy. You could tell they were actively listening. The policy framework has been written, I think, to really commend BMZ. The development policy has best-in-class language on diversity, inclusion, equity, anti-colonialism, anti-racism, and the challenge of doing that given a colonial past and a neo-colonial present. And I think that's what you want to see as an advocate.
And but really, that's the best in class.
Best in class. We just wrote this paper. You can find it on our website. I think the challenge is also going to be for them to then learn from partners like the Dutch about, okay, how do you make that show up in your development cooperation? How do you move more of those funds directly to frontline activists, as in the words of our Urgent Action Fund partners? How do you move away from de-risking and embrace risk? Mm-hmm. Things are going haywire. Things are going to go wrong. It's not if, but when. And how are we telling the story of change and impact in a way that is accountable to taxpayers, but is also telling the story of change? And I think that for those who are still writing, those are lessons that can be learned, but I'm very interested to see what happens for Mexico, who will be a few years in at this point. So how does having the conference move to Mexico inform updates pivots, what lessons can we learn on how it's going? All these beautiful words that we take such brave steps to put on paper, are they actually being implemented? How is that showing up across the region? The Latin America region just had, I think, the first feminist foreign policy regional convening, included ECLAC and its other regional partners. There was a very brave outcome document that came from that. How is it translating to impacting people's lives? And so I think a space like this is one of learning, but I also want to give us credit for having actually moved the needle on this discourse farther than we realize. We're not there. We may never get there. It's a process of continual learning and evolution, but we are getting better all the time together.
Okay, clear. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move to another pair, Memory and Pascal. We've heard about the need for deep listening, the benefit of blueprints that are, like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel to some extent. A lot of the work has been done, blueprints that are super inclusive, but it's still a process that you're going to have to negotiate your way through to embed a feminist foreign policy. Memory, in terms of that negotiation, it's a balancing act that I feel organizations often have to play, but what are the non-negotiables, you think, for feminist organizations? Where do you think they should draw the line in terms of having set principles that are set in stone?
Okay. I'd say for feminist governments, not for feminist organizations, like what are the non-negotiables? I think one of the non-negotiables should really be centered on shifting power, structural and systemic power, really embedding feminist foreign policy in power analysis. And I think this is something where we are moving from theory to practice, to say the systemic inequalities that we constantly struggle with will always show up. So I think part of deep listening is the uncomfortable conversation that Pascal mentioned, to say sometimes it's listening when we talk about decolonialization. How can we have that conversation without talking about reparations? I think the panel that was in here, which was talking about trade, reshaping trade issues. I think for me, that's some of the non-negotiables.
Yeah, but just to push you a little bit on that, are you really saying you would not engage with a government unless they are willing to have a conversation about reparations, let's say? You won't engage with them on any other aspect of FFP?
No, I think it's important to have both inside and outside. So I think one thing which is very appreciative is having feminist activists who are within government and who are actually, I think we saw it when German was writing his feminist policy, where you have to be a feminist, you have to believe in those principles to be able to drive it. And we feel that if we do, it's a step in. And it's having that leeway. So I think it's a way we need to be both, to say we have a way in where we can still really at least have a way to start talking about these things, to even start saying these are the principles you need to be accountable to, right?
And from a government point of view, are there non-negotiables? I mean, it's all very well to say, no, we're happy to welcome everyone, talk with anyone, but are there certain demands that you say, look, we just can't even have a conversation if that's where you're going? Like, what are the government non-negotiables?
I think we can talk about everything.
Oh,
I don't think
I suspected that answer.
No, but I mean, if you look at feminist foreign policy, and I think Lyric, you also said it, it's about pushing the needle. It's about a process. We can talk about everything, but we cannot solve everything now. So, but I think for me, and is feminist foreign policy is the ambition that we want to keep pushing the needle. I think the Netherlands was in development cooperation already quite early in having gender equality central in the programs, then followed women, peace and security, then in our diplomacy. And I think with the feminist foreign policy, the political decision was being made, it was not enough, we want to push further. So for me, it's like a continuum. So you can speak about everything, but we cannot we cannot solve or we cannot address everything at the same time.
Okay, but then give me an example of where the friction is, where it's not so easy to have that conversation.
I think there are many things that are not so easy. I think
because this is useful advice for
in trade, it's not so easy. In the middle of conflict, it's not so easy. That's why I was crying yesterday when I saw Natalia, who we met on the 8th of March when she was fleeing from a car in Ukraine. And I think hearing from her how she was supporting women in Ukraine actually helped us transform our policy in Ukraine. So I think it's about making time in the crisis to listen to women like Natalia and women like you and others to improve the policy and the decisions that we are making.
And what was it about listening to her that made it possible to transform the policy? Can you elaborate?
No, we were in the middle of a crisis. I think when we spoke to Natalia, it was the 8th of March, and I think it was very recent in the horrific incidents. And because speaking to her, actually, we made sure that we arranged money, because it's again about putting money where your mouth is, because we can speak all day. We arranged additional money to organizations in Ukraine, women's organizations, but also to, I think it was UNFPA, to safeguard abortion pills or SIHR or rape kits. So it's taking the time to really think about what will help the women in a conflict.
And just one last time, just to be absolutely clear, I mean, was it the power of her advocacy? Was it that she was a first-hand witness of things, so she was sharing details? Was it more than that?
I think it's the person as well. You know, Natalia, I don't know where she is, but I think it's...
She's unwell today,
so I'm
she's
sorry
not
to hear that.
us,
No, but I think it was everything. It was about making a case, making clear why it's needed, what is needed. So also a very concrete ask that we could fulfill. And then we make available the funding.
Yeah. And memory, is that something you feel as well, in terms of the things that make a difference from your perspective as someone applying for funding?
Yeah.
What strategy do you use to achieve your goal?
I think it's bringing the critical issues to the fore. So I think another contention is when we look at the climate crisis, for example, and we see commitments which have to be fulfilled, you know, the ODA development commitments, and I think that's usually a tension to say, can you fulfill these goals when there are negotiations? Sometimes we don't see governments with feminist foreign policy showing up in solidarity, in fulfilling some of this. And I think another tension is really on sometimes the siloing, where it's specific to say, this is going to be, you know, our work is intersectional. So you only have to apply for maybe SRHR and not look at economic justice and not climate justice. So sometimes that splits the movement. But the contention also comes when we see cuts in budgets. So you find, we are cutting the gender fund for us to support immigrants, for example. So all those they are very key. I mean, it's a feminist issue to be supporting immigrants and to be supporting domestic policy, yes. But why cut the funding which has been secured for women's rights, for women's movement? Why not look for other funding, defund military security funds, which we know are harmful, causing genocide? So I think those are the contentions, and it creates lots of competition. It creates a whole cycle where movements, if there's no access to be able to reach and to say, this is what's happening, this is what's happening in Ukraine, this is what's happening everywhere, or, I mean,
I'd like to pick up on that. Pick up on that with you, Janarit. You know, Mexico is the first country in South America to embrace feminist foreign policy, but you had Lyric talking about, and also yesterday in some sessions about just, I've said it for the third time, but these precarious political times that we're in. Is there is there a counter push? How easy is it to raise funding for and political will for feminist foreign policy in Mexico, in your region of the world?
Well, it's a process at the end. It's not very easy, let's say that, to take this big step to have a really feminist foreign policy. What does it mean to have a feminist foreign policy?
Yeah.
It means to challenge the structural inequalities that we are facing in the world. So our vision is that we are going to have a very interesting dialogue between the different concepts of feminist foreign policy that we have from the countries from the north and from the south. Because we have to address inequalities inside countries, but also between countries that impede this, to hinder these barriers, these obstacles that we are facing for gender equality. And I think in this process, the dialogue is going to be very, very interesting. And even inside our societies, there are a lot of the structure of patriarchal culture is very
embedded.
It's there.
Yeah.
So even inside, for example, our ministries of foreign affairs is also there. We have this objective to be transformative outside in our foreign policy in all areas. Mainstream the concept in the bilateral, in multilateral, in consular areas, but also inside our own ministry to have more equality of, for example, the women diplomats, the careers that we have in, to have more equality and parity on the participation of women diplomats to implement the foreign policies. We need to be there as women. So it's complex, but we need to do it.
And are there any kind of game-changing arguments? Because you said it's a process. There are people who are for, there are people who resist, there are people who are just outright against. Are there particular arguments that work, in your experience, to bring people in?
Well, I think that the information and the data that we have gathered in so far, for example, in the last meeting of the General Assembly, when we have the ministerial level of this main conference, and we have also the meeting of how we are doing to performance to accomplish with the objectives of the Agenda 2030, it was very clear that we are very behind. And if we don't, at the end, I think of one report said that if we don't get the gender equality soon, we are going to put at risk the rest of the objectives of the Agenda 2030. That is something that is really in the core of the concept of development, for benefit of all the society. It's not from the benefit only for women. It's from the advancement of all the societies. That's why we have to put at the center of all the agendas this concept of gender equality and the structural changes with the feminist concept.
Yeah, that feels like a good pillar, a good principle, that interconnectedness of feminist ideals with the SDGs. Yeah. Laila, the role of the civil society, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a very important one, being a critical watchdog and a strategic partner. So to make sure that shaping, whatever you call it, a feminist foreign policy is not a pinkwashing document. So it is also not a process that is static but dynamic. So we continuously learning about what it is to be a feminist and how the government needs to be responding. I think the first thing that we should push for right now is asking for a ceasefire. And it is, we cannot keep talking about having a feminist foreign policy without demilitarization, without tackling root causes of conflict, and also be brave enough to acknowledge that. So policy coherence, the one thing that is also mentioned, reality check, it's up to the civil society to keep the government accountable.
And strategies to do that, to keep government accountable? Very briefly, because we have to wrap up.
Very briefly, solidarity. So also amongst ourselves, amongst the feminist movement, keep informing each other, learning from each other, and also be open for other movements. You know, the feminist movement is not a movement in itself. It is really interconnected with other movements that strive for social change, disability movements, racism, tackling racism. So solidarity is key, and keep each other informed.
Okay, thank you very much, Laila. And thank you very much to all of our guests. I'd like you to stay on stage for the moment. Appreciate it. Stay on stage.
Oh, I thought you said stand.
That's what I said as well. This is from falling out. Listen, we're drawing to the close of the conference, but of course we've still got our keynote speaker here, and we'll be hearing from the conference ambassadors again shortly. Before we do, though, sorry, I'm just getting something in my ear. I'm not sure if are we going okay, right, yes. We're going straight to our keynote speaker. So if you would, I'll invite all of our guests to leave the podium, and we'll go straight to our keynote speaker. A round of applause, please, for all of our guests. If you give a warm round of applause, please, to our keynote speaker, the Dutch Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hanke Bruins-Slot.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. This conference is taking place in turbulent times, and I realize that this is a difficult period for all of us. The world has been shocked by these horrific developments in Israel and the Palestinian territories. The Netherlands strongly condemns the indiscriminate terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel. And we support Israel's right to defend itself, using measures that are proportional, using measures that are in line with international law, and restraint from Israel is necessary when it comes to the use of force. As my colleague Liesje Schrijnemacher already pointed out, the gravity and the scale of the conflict are deeply concerning. And we must do what we can to prevent regional escalation. Yes, we must stop the suffering in Gaza and loss of life, which is immense. To the people raising their voices right now, I want to say thank you for speaking out. I hear you, and I see your concerns. And I can tell you, I too have grave concerns regarding the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And it is good that you address this issue during the whole conference, because feminist foreign policy is about dialogue and about finding shared goals. It is important that we as the Netherlands have set aside another 50 million euros for assistance, on top of the 10 million euros already pledged. It is also why the Netherlands is urgently appealing for humanitarian pauses and a humanitarian corridor. And it's why I have stressed to all our international partners that aid needs to be entering Gaza much more frequently and much more faster. Because essential human needs must be met. A further loss of civilian lives must be prevented. And there's another important point I would like to raise. The work of NGOs and of civil society organizations and humanitarian aid workers is crucial everywhere, and especially in conflict areas. What is also crucial is that you speak up and speak out, and that you can do this without having to fear for reprisals. Feminist foreign policy is not a soft topic. It deals with the harsh realities in which many women, girls, and marginalized groups live. And that's why current events are playing a major role in this conference. From the violence in Gaza and Israel to the war in Ukraine and the coups in the Sahel, it's conflicts like these that demonstrate why feminist foreign policy is so crucial. Because women are often victims into conflicts. But also because women, in all their diversity, can help prevent such conflicts. Research has shown that peace lasts longer when women have played a significant role in negotiating it. More broadly, constructive dialogue and inclusive cooperation are instinct to feminine foreign policy. As UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed put it during the first UN conference on this topic, and I quote, "We need to talk across. We need to find what binds us together and not what separates us. It's going to be amazing when we do it right." I find her words powerful for many reasons, perhaps mostly because together they wave a compelling message of hope. A message that is so very welcome in a time tainted by conflicts and war, by power play and polarization, by climate change and poverty. To all of you here today, thank you for being here. Your presence matters, and so does your valuable work. All of you are working so hard towards creating a more equal world, in a broader sense of the word, a world in which gender equality is the norm rather than the exception. And in this light, let me also thank all the people who helped organize this conference. You are helping us reach the goals we are all striving for. By adopting a feminist foreign policy, governments stand on the shoulders of great feminist thinkers of the past, and also on all the great organizations and individuals that we have in the room here today. And so do many other countries who believe in what feminist foreign policy stands for, but prefer to use different words for this. The Netherlands is strongly committed to promoting equality. In all our work, we try to strengthen the rights, resources, and representation of women and other marginalized groups. For example, by including a gender expert in our delegation at the COP, by successfully advocating for EU sanctions against sexual violence perpetrators, and by emphasizing women's rights globally and especially in peace process. Our goal of a more equal world must be integrated in all our endeavors. And that's why we are also launching an online tool to integrate feminine foreign policy into everything we do at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And let me show an animation about this.
To a safe, stable, and prosperous world. That's what feminist foreign policy stands for. The Ministry developed an innovative online tool for the implementation of the policy. Ministry of Foreign Affairs employees find background information and practical examples to use in their daily work. This is how we contribute to more equal opportunities worldwide.
What I find so powerful is that it promotes inclusivity in the broader sense of the word. It's this broad equality I stand for too. And that's not just because I believe that everyone should have the opportunity to speak and to participate. It's because exclusion also impairs those who are included. Because excluding half of the world's population literally means giving it just 50%. We can only address the problems in our world when we put it in our full effort and when all voices are heard and included. Of course, policy is not a panacea, but by itself it won't put an end to sexual violence, to conflicts, inequalities, punishment and insecurity. Yet I hope it will empower those who can put an end to all of this. That's why I'm so pleased that Mexico has decided to host the next Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference. As Amina Mohammed put it so eloquently, we need to make sure that every stitch in this feminist foreign policy tapestry is bright and vibrant and strong, as we are. Esteemed guests, when I look before me into this room, I can see how bright, how vibrant, and how strong that tapestry is. And that makes me truly grateful. My gratitude for your important work is immense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Minister, I don't know what to say. Like, obviously, there's a lot of passion in the room. There's a lot of, yeah. 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 I know. I know. Well, I suppose you can understand at this time more than perhaps any other. Her plate is quite full, as they say in Dutch. I know. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. I wish I could get mics to absolutely everyone. Look, like I said, I actually don't know. I'm kind of lost for words. Like, I know I'm feeling something. Okay. All right. All right. Woo! Okay. A collective moment there. Good. All right. Well, we're going to end on something upbeat. These guys. Okay. We're going to end on something upbeat. Because that's all we can do, right? That's all we can do right here. So, okay, just a moment, please. If it's okay, just a moment. We're going to end on something which this conference deserves, which these people deserve, and that's the conference ambassadors. So please join me in giving them a huge hand, okay? Sophia, Marcia, Mike Tembo, Natalia Karbowska, Maria Alabe. Come. Raoul, Anisha, and Laxman. Yeah. Ah, that's for you. All right. Now, there's something I can get quite OCD about that. There's something quite nicely symmetrical about the fact that you cried at the opening, and now you got me in tears. Yeah. Okay. All right. Guys, we are at the close pretty much of this, so I'd love to give the final word to all of you. Unfortunately, Natalia is not able to join us here, but we're going to start with Sofia. When you go back to the Garifuna people who you work with back home in Honduras, what message are you going to take from this conference?
Well, I've been listening, talking around with people that justice for Berta Cáceres need to be done. And make justice for Berta is also keep alive the Garifuna people, keep alive the people that we are here also, the people that is facing every day the crisis, the violence. So being together is also a way to make justice. So justice is important, but also it's important to hearing us, listening, really, not making a dialogue. Yeah. Is important to be done. And also, here we are, the Feminist Fund, the Feminist Movement. Here we are ready to be partnering, to talk, to listen.
No, thank you very much. Laxman, has anything you heard at this conference, like genuinely, I'd like everyone to reflect on this, like made you stop and actually think, okay, I'm gonna behave differently. I'm gonna do different things. That hasn't worked in the past. This is going to work. What impact is it really gonna have on you?
So I think one of the main things that I would repeat is, again, the importance of listening to feminist movement and what they are asking for. And I think that should be at the center of the essence of implementation of feminist foreign policy. And then importance of not taking this work as a charity work. It's a human rights issue. So a global north country having a feminist foreign policy doesn't make you look good until that is implemented meaningfully in the feminist way, in collaboration and solidarity with the feminist movement and those who are marginalized in different areas of work. But also then that means from the work that I do in specific is that how important is it to embed this vision for feminist equality in the other policies as well, so that this doesn't become a standalone, but then really uproots and challenges the other policies that are reinforcing inequalities, such as the policy around safety and security, the military policy, the defense policy, and so on, which always gets prioritized in the space. But how can this feminist foreign policy start reconsidering some of those policies to make them feminist as well?
Very clear. Thank you very much. Maria. Okay. Anisha. Specifically about the funding, because that is a theme that keeps coming back. Do you feel that your plea and the pleas of everyone here, requests, demands almost have been heard?
Well, if they haven't been heard, I don't know what's the point of the conference, but I really hope it has been heard. We've been saying from the very beginning, listen. And I think to me, the moment you say resources, rights, rooted in reality check, and then have feminism there, it's a call to action. It's about accountability. Accountability flows both ways. And yeah, I think what we've been talking about over the past, not few days, but decades, has been the resources and the funding need to be movement-led, need to be movement-centered. It's not enough just to get by. We need to double, triple the commitments over the coming years. So for me, that's what I'm taking away, that if this is a feminist foreign policy conference, and Netherlands has been one of the biggest supporters of feminist movements in terms of resourcing them. So for me, I'm taking away that commitment to stand by the movements, especially in times of crisis that we are seeing today when the world around is burning. So I'm walking away with that.
Okay.
Thank you. And ceasefire now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now.
Raoul.
Yeah.
Is there practical know-how, things that you've learned? Because I saw you at the sessions. What are you going to take home? What have you picked up?
For me, one thing that I picked up in this conference is that I hope the ministry, the policymakers, we have made you uncomfortable. You were challenged with all the things that's been said by everyone here. For the LGBTIQ community, that we're continuously being resourced. We have resources to fight counter-narratives to anti-gender rights, and that anti-gender rights and movements are not being supported. Because after all, it's us being at the front line, being subjected to discrimination, violence, and even death. Yeah, and finally, ceasefire now.
I want to go to you, Maria, and then I'm going to go to Mike.
Right.
I want to go to you first.
Okay. I will walk out with the power of the movement, because still we have a lot of things to do, because honestly, I'm quite frustrated and sad and scared. I'm scared that there is people, civilians, being killed right now under the name of self-defense, and we are doing nothing. I'm scared for them. I'm scared for my own country, that it will be forgotten, for other countries that will be forgotten because they became too complicated. While I will always advocate, and feminists will always advocate, we can't solve conflict. We need to come back to the root causes of the conflict. We need to get back to justice. The crisis in Gaza is not only humanitarian, it's very much political, and it's about justice and right. Thank you very much.
Ceasefire now.
Yeah, ceasefire now, but it is not enough. Not enough. Ceasefire is only a part of our demands.
Yeah.
We need justice.
Mike,
yes.
Final word from you.
All right. My takeaway is that I've seen that a number of people are crying out. The voices are crying out, and they need to be heard. Most women out here, you can see we have beautiful faces, but there's a voice out there that is crying out that needs to be heard. And this conference, it has given us that chance to interact with each and everyone here to get to know what they are actually going through. So when I go back to my country in the Global South, in Zambia, I will tell them that we really need to support women, to put more effort in the supporting of women and also listening to their voices so that they can be heard everywhere. And last but not the least, I think I stand with my brother, ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now!
Okay, everyone. I want to pick up on something Raoul said, which, there's been a lot of discomfort on stage, and, a lot of us confuse happiness with comfort these days, and that's a spirit that we need to go forward with. Those are big words for me. It's discomfort, it's solidarity, and I'm just very, very grateful for all of you for speaking up, speaking your truth, for all of you, absolutely, for speaking your truth and for the work that you do. It has been a complete privilege. My name's Iken Azuike, and I'm out. It is my pleasure to wish you a very warm welcome to the second Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference 2023.
I think it's really important to come together all across civil society and governments really to discuss these issues all together.
I have conversations sometimes with funders who are like, oh, but there's no groups out there that can receive our funding. I'm like, that's a lot of bullshit.
We really need to have that discussion with people from all over the world, but also from different gender identities, sexual orientations, because that will truly make our policies feminist.
Heavy militarized, masculine solutions to conflict and violence have led us to nowhere. They have benefited no one except armed trade and arms industry. And it is time to really think through a feminist lenses.
To be honest, real power is never freely given. It needs to be taken. So we need to support women and girls to take up that power.
Feminist foreign policy is not about women only. We need all genders, so I'm very happy to see so many active men taking their responsibility.
I think the most important message that I heard here is that you need to deserve the feminist label. You are not just a feminist because you say so, but you are a feminist because you do feminist things.
So really being part of these conversations is important because then we're able to set for the future.
We need every feminist regardless of their gender.
Your insights are crucial.
What's going on? Because things have to change.
No, we are patriarchal institutions. I truly believe that we have to go into those institutions with the clear conviction that we are there to change the way those institutions work.